This girl has been dead for 3 days. Today happens to be her burial day. But suddenly, her corpse's mouth opened and a huge moth crawled out. The relatives in the mourning hall had no idea about the strange occurrence in the morgue. They only saw many moths gathering on the roof. The priest had a bad feeling, as if some mysterious force was approaching. He kept chanting prayers, hoping the deceased could rest in peace. But that mysterious force drew closer and closer. Gusts of eerie wind blew through, the altar candles extinguished, and the priest even spat blood, banging his head madly against the altar. The 2024 South Korean supernatural horror film Devil's Day is now showing. Set against the backdrop of Korea's traditional 3-day funeral rituals, the film tells the story of a father who engages in a 3-day life and death battle with a demon to save his daughter, who unexpectedly comes back to life. The deceased, named May, was a sweet and well-behaved little girl with a happy family. Her father, Kevin, is a renowned heart surgeon whose skilled hands have healed thousands of patients without a single failure. However, fate played a cruel joke. May suffered from a severe heart condition. When the time came for her to undergo a heart transplant, Kevin decided to personally perform the surgery, unwilling to entrust his daughter's life to anyone else. The transplant was a great success, and May quickly recovered and was discharged from the hospital. But 4 months later, the poor girl ended up lying in the cold morgue. The moment Kevin received the confirmation of his daughter's death, his world collapsed. May's funeral was carried out methodically at the funeral home of Seoul Central Hospital. Following the Korean tradition of a 3-day funeral, the deceased must remain in the funeral home for 3 days before burial. During these 3 days, family and friends can come to pay their respects. Looking at his once vibrant and beautiful daughter, now only able to smile through her photograph, Kevin was overwhelmed with grief. May's parents were in unbearable pain. The funeral home staff suggested that for young people, it's common to opt for a simplified funeral, holding the burial after just 1 day instead of the 3-day wait. This, they said, could reduce the family's suffering. But May's grandmother disagreed. At this time, there was an issue with May's body in the morgue. The cooling unit broke down. The staff took the opportunity to reorganize May's body, trying to relax the stiff parts so she could look beautiful for the burial. However, they noticed that May's right hand was tightly clenched and wouldn't open no matter how they tried. Not daring to force it, they called Kevin over. Kevin, heartbroken, held his daughter's hand, gently breathed on it, and slowly pried open her fist. Inside, he found a Polaris bracelet. He remembered it was the lucky bracelet he had personally put on her wrist before her surgery, saying, "Let Dad be your Polaris, you'll never lose your way." The more Kevin thought about it, the more it hurt. He placed the bracelet back onto her cold wrist, as if giving her his protection once more. The 3-day funeral continued. At this time, Kevin's colleagues from Seoul Central Hospital also came to pay their respects. On the surface, they appeared deeply sorrowful, but while smoking outside, their conversations were full of snide remarks. They criticized Kevin, saying he always relied on his skills to nitpick others, and now that he had caused his daughter's death, he had finally learned his lesson. Some mentioned hearing from nurses that May had behaved strangely after the surgery, as if she had developed delusions, or, as others whispered, been possessed by a ghost. They spoke with relish, completely unaware that Kevin, sitting in a nearby car, overheard every word. Enraged, Kevin got out of the car, slammed the door, and stormed off. Returning to the funeral site, Kevin found no peace for his ears. May's classmates had also come to pay their respects. Following the customs, they stayed for a meal after the service. During the meal, the kids began chatting away, discussing how they believed May was possessed by a ghost, and they even claimed to have evidence. They said that after May returned to school post-surgery, her personality completely changed. She even pushed a male classmate, causing his arm to break, and now he's still wearing a cast. However, the boy didn't blame May. He felt as though it wasn't really May who did those things but something inside her, something that had taken over. When May's mother overheard the discussions, she wasn't angry. In fact, she almost felt a sense of understanding. After the surgery, May had even attacked her at home, trying to kill her. It was only when Kevin rushed in that he managed to pull May off. The things May had screamed weren't words she would ever say. She kept shouting that she wanted to kill her mother. When May snapped back to her senses, she was filled with deep remorse and would apologize to her parents. As if the person who had done those things wasn't even her. This left May's family extremely worried about her condition. In the end, they decided to let Father Jack perform an exorcism on May. Listening to his daughter's increasingly horrific screams, Kevin's heart ached terribly. Ignoring his family's pleas and Jack's warnings, he was determined to rush in and save her. He found the door locked from the inside and began desperately hammering with his fists, then smashing it with an axe. By the time he broke in, the exorcism had already ended. Kevin rushed into the room, only to find his daughter limp and powerless, filled with sorrow. But then, May suddenly began convulsing violently, an unusual and terrifying reaction. Despite Kevin's immediate attempts to revive her, May ultimately failed to regain her breath or heartbeat. She passed away just like that. Kevin was lost in thought, his mind drifting. Suddenly, he noticed that a large amount of blood had dripped into his glass of wine. He glanced up, and a corner of the ceiling was soaked with blood, continuously dripping down. At the same time, the girl who had been speaking ill of May suddenly fell to the ground in agony, foaming at the mouth, looking on the brink of death. Thanks to Kevin's timely use of first aid, he managed to get her to cough up something lodged in her throat, a clump of hair mixed with other matter. On the other side, the cooling unit in the morgue was finally repaired. After the staff pushed May's body inside, they suddenly heard strange knocking sounds. Soon, the lights in the room began to flicker, and May's body under the white cloth suddenly moved. Terrified, the staff fled the morgue in a panic. That night, May's family rested in the Morning Hall. Her father, still keeping vigil over May, seemed to see her in a daze, standing in front of him, saying she was so cold. Kevin approached her, wanting to cover her with a blanket, when suddenly black liquid began to ooze from May's body. Kevin opened his eyes and realized it had all been a dream, but when he put on his glasses, he noticed that the lenses were cracked, just as in the dream. Kevin walked outside the Morning Hall, only to see frozen footprints where May had been standing moments before, slowly fading away. Panicked, Kevin rushed to the morgue, pulled May's body out of the cooling unit, and, fearing she might be cold, covered her with his suit jacket. Kevin then lay on the floor, holding his daughter's hand, and fell into a deep sleep. But just then, May's eyes suddenly opened. Meanwhile, Father Jack, who had performed the exorcism on May, went to see an elderly priest. At home, he repeatedly watched the footage of the exorcism, and the more he watched, the more uneasy he became. He had clearly driven the demon out of May, so why did she still die? Jack recalled the demon's true identity when it spoke, as it had mentioned the name Beelzebub, followed by the word Melech. Jack believed there wasn't just one demon in May, but possibly two. The elderly priest realized the situation was more complicated than it seemed and advised Jack to stop pursuing the matter, promising to go to the funeral site to assess the situation and report it to higher authorities. But Jack was determined to see it through. He remembered that his best friend had died at the hands of a demon, and that same demon was likely the one now tormenting May. Jack vowed to kill the demon and avenge both his friend and May. The first day of the funeral passed by with outward calm. The second day was the day of the casket sealing. In the morning, the family gathered around May's body for the farewell ceremony, crying in sorrow. Kevin noticed that his daughter's eyes were open. He rushed to her side and saw a tear sliding down her cheek. Something was wrong. May wasn't dead. He refused to let her be buried just like this. Kevin tried to pull his daughter to attempt resuscitation, but he was held back by others. No one but him had seen May's eyes open, and as for the tear, it was common for some corpses to shed tears after death. They dragged Kevin away, but after everyone left, something strange happened. From May's mouth, a large mouth crawled out. The funeral continued in the Morning Hall. The old priest said he would do it, and he really came to the funeral site in person to help May's soul pass on. After he arrived, there was always an ominous feeling that filled his whole body. The funeral site was filled with a cold wind, and many moths gathered on the ceiling, with more and more gathering. At this time, Kevin was still causing a scene, insisting on rescuing his daughter's body. The priest looked around at the environment and felt that waiting any longer was not an option. Even though May's relatives hadn't all arrived, he had to quickly help the soul pass on. If they waited any longer, something bad might happen. He prayed for everyone, but in the next second, Kevin had already broken through all obstacles and snatched May's body. He pushed her body into the resuscitation room and started shocking her, hoping her heartbeat would return. However, His repeated shocks not only failed to wake May up, but instead fully awakened the demon inside her. A blood-stained hand slowly swept across the flowers in the morning hall. Blood suddenly poured from the priest's mouth. Immediately after, he uncontrollably slammed his head into the altar. The priest's face became a mess of blood and flesh, his teeth all fallen out. Then, he saw countless moths flying toward him. He kept swatting at them, but the moths not only weren't scared, they gathered more and more. His red eyes moved, and he suddenly saw the deceased May standing right in front of him. On the other side, Jack didn't give up on investigating the identity of the demon possessing May. He came across the name Beelzebub in some records. According to legend, a pure-hearted girl from Nazareth suddenly became pregnant and gave birth to conjoined twins. The elder twin was named Beelzebub, and the younger twin didn't even have a name. The demon, revived through the twins' bodies, could deceive humans and make them kill each other, causing widespread suffering. Eventually, the priests sealed the younger twin inside Beelzebub's heart to prevent further crimes. When Jack thought of this, he rushed to the funeral home and found the blood-covered priest being pushed out. He rushed over, and the priest suddenly grabbed Jack with bloodshot eyes, warning everyone that no matter how much they struggled, they could never defeat them. Jack arrived at the morgue, where May's body had been sent again. Just as Jack poured holy water over May's body, May's parents arrived. Kevin punched Jack in the face, demanding to know what he was planning to do with his daughter. But May's mother, in terror, discovered that countless dark marks had appeared on May's body, and they were spreading more and more, already reaching her face. Jack explained that the body's reaction to the holy water meant the demon was still inside May. This was likely related to the heart she had transplanted. They needed to quickly find clues about the heart donor and trace where the demon came from. If they ignored it, the demon would awaken through May's body, just like Jesus resurrected 3 days after his death. Once the demon woke up, it would first kill May's family. Now, they had to hurry and cremate the body. If they burned the heart, the demon might not awaken. Kevin cursed Jack but actually felt very guilty. Jack said there was something wrong with the heart transplanted into May. Of course, there was a problem. It was a heart his colleague secretly found for him, an illegal one taken from a living person. When Kevin first learned about this, he was furious. But in order to save his daughter, he decided to take the heart from a girl who was badly injured but still alive. Now, hearing that there was a demon in the heart, Kevin rushed back to the hospital and grabbed the colleague who had provided him with the heart, demanding to know what was going on. The colleague explained that the heart's donor came from a fire scene in Izu. The donor was a Russian girl who had been illegally staying in Japan with her mother. They were both undocumented, which is why the colleague thought that, even if the girl died, no one would trace it. The colleague suggested Kevin go to a Russian community in Izu to find the Big Mama there, as she might be able to provide more details about the donor. Kevin rushed to Izu overnight and arrived at an underground bar where Russians gathered. As soon as the people there heard he was looking for Big Mama, they became suspicious and immediately knocked Kevin out. When he woke up, he found himself tied in a metal cage. Standing before him was the woman known as Big Mama. She was a Russian pagan, obsessed with resurrecting the demon. To escape the pursuit of the Russian Orthodox Church, she had fled to Korea with her daughter, using her daughter's body as a vessel to attempt to resurrect Beelzebub. However, her plan failed. The Russian Orthodox Church had found them and planned to burn her daughter alive to prevent the demon from being revived. Now, she needed a new vessel, and that vessel was May. She had donated her daughter's heart to May, hoping the demon sealed within it would be revived through May's body. Now, Kevin had the audacity to try and stop her. She had to kill him to ensure May's body was free of attachments and would willingly fall into darkness, becoming Beelzebub's vessel and allowing the demon to resurrect. Just as Big Mama was about to stab Kevin in the chest with a knife, the sound of a chant filled the air. It was as if Big Mama had been trapped, and she screamed in agony, unable to stand any longer. It turned out that Jack had found his way here. He still tried to persuade Kevin to burn May's body, but Kevin refused and drove off. Jack intended to follow him, but suddenly he felt disoriented. He recalled the murmurs of his friend before passing away, and then his friend, as if driven mad, had tried to strangle Jack. Fortunately, Jack had insisted on exorcising the demon, but when the demon left his friend's body, his friend died as well. Jack was severely injured, on the verge of death. This remained his greatest trauma. Hearing the name, Mary, triggered a wave of fear and memories in Jack's mind. It was as if he saw his friend possessed by the demon standing at the street corner, lunging toward him to kill him. Clutching his rosary, Jack recited prayers repeatedly until his friend disappeared. Jack regained his freedom, realizing it was just a manifestation of his inner demons, not real. The terrifying night had come to an end, and by the third day, it was time for May's funeral. However, everyone waited for a long time without seeing Kevin. With time running out, they had no choice but to follow May's coffin, slowly leaving the funeral home. Suddenly, the 6 men carrying the coffin stumbled, and it fell to the ground. When they tried to lift it again, they found the coffin incredibly heavy, so heavy that the 6 adult men couldn't lift it. At that moment, Kevin returned. He saw a blood-covered figure standing next to his daughter's coffin, which was slowly sliding toward a corner. Kevin rushed to the coffin, grabbed a fire extinguisher, and frantically smashed it open. He then grabbed his daughter's body and ran. The security guards rushed forward to stop him, forcibly restraining Kevin and taking him away. Meanwhile, May's body fell to the ground. At this moment, Jack also arrived at the funeral home. He came to May's body, covered it with a cloth, and began reciting scriptures. But it was too late. The scriptures couldn't calm the demon. In front of everyone's eyes, May's body suddenly flew into the air. The blood-soaked figure on the high building was controlling her body, guiding her toward it. Suddenly, the figure let go, and Kevin realized he hadn't caught anything. His daughter's body had vanished into thin air. Desperate, Kevin searched for his daughter and eventually found himself in the underground mechanical room of the central hospital. There, May stood in the darkness, saying she couldn't hold on any longer. She suddenly disappeared into the shadows. Kevin rushed forward, only to see the blood-soaked ghostly figure flash past. He continued to feel his way through the darkness until he finally opened a door that hadn't been touched in a long time. Inside, the room was filled with moths, and May was lying on the ground, her body covered in them. Kevin tried to rush over, but each time he was knocked back. It wasn't until Jack found the room that he was able to get close to May's body. Kevin, filled with hope, looked at Jack and asked if there was any way to save May. He knew that May wasn't willing to let go, and she was waiting for him to rescue her. Jack was also surprised. If May's soul was still there, it might be possible to save her. Jack then asked Kevin to help him chant the scriptures, as he would once again attempt to exorcise the demon from May. Before starting the ritual, he warned Kevin that no matter what they saw or heard, they must not be deceived. The exorcism ritual began. Jack sprinkled holy water all over May's body. Soon, Kevin began to see hallucinations. The sight of his daughter trembling in pain broke his heart, and he could barely continue chanting the scriptures. But he remembered Jack's warning and gritted his teeth to control his emotions. The chant never stopped. Eventually, Kevin managed to get through the hallucination, but the demon's tactics grew even more terrifying. First, Kevin noticed that the scriptures in his hands turned into an unreadable blank book. Then, the scene around him changed, and he found himself in the morgue, searching through the drawers for May. Instead, he found the blood-soaked female ghost. The scene shifted again, and Kevin realized he was strapped to an operating table, surrounded by his colleagues and May's mother, preparing to cut out his heart. He even heard the sound of the heart monitor flatlining. Just as Kevin was about to give in, Jack's chant reached him, awakening his willpower. But then Kevin had another hallucination. This time, he saw Jack as the demon planning to kill his daughter. Immediately, Kevin grabbed a scalpel and pinned Jack to the ground, about to stab him in the neck. Despite everything, Jack kept chanting the incantations. As long as the ritual continued, Jack couldn't break free from Kevin's grip. At that moment, in some mysterious way, May's soul seemed to leap into her father's arms, stopping him from going any further. Her voice awakened Kevin's will, and Jack narrowly escaped death. Finally, Jack could breathe a sigh of relief. As the exorcism neared its end, success seemed within reach. The final, most crucial step was to call out the demon's name and completely expel it from May's body. Jack, already faint, was close to losing consciousness, and the ritual was just one step away from completion. Kevin repeatedly asked how he could save his daughter. Suddenly, May's soul appeared again, holding a scalpel to her father's neck. She scolded him as a despicable person, accusing him of knowing the heart was illegal but still using it to revive her. Kevin admitted he was willing to bear the guilt, to trade his own life for his daughter's resurrection. With determination, he stepped forward, letting the scalpel pierce his chest. In the next moment, the black marks on May's body began to fade, and these marks crawled up her father's face. When May's mother found her, she was shocked to discover that her daughter had a faint heartbeat and breathing. The doctor rushed to her side, and soon, her heartbeat, breathing, and body temperature returned to normal. Jack, covered in wounds, was rushed to the emergency center for treatment. However, when Jack woke up, he once again saw the moth, a symbol of the demon. Following the moth, he made his way to the top floor of the hospital, where he found Kevin. Kevin, having bargained with the demon, had allowed it to transfer into him so that May could survive. However, the demon would control its host, making them kill their loved ones. That's why May had tried to strangle her mother. Now, Kevin's mind was filled with thoughts of killing his own family. He knew he would soon be completely controlled by the demon. He couldn't compromise with it anymore. Jack wanted to help Kevin exorcise the demon, but Kevin didn't want to drag anyone else into his fate. Kevin didn't die immediately. Instead, he used a lighter to set his car on fire, choosing to burn himself and the demon alive, ending it all. Kevin's sacrifice was not in vain. May quickly recovered and returned to her normal school life. She visited her father's grave with her mother and brother, and she would never forget that it was her father who sacrificed his life to save her. Of course, she was also grateful to Jack for giving her the chance to be reborn. On the surface, this film may seem like a ghost story, but in reality, the true demon stemmed from the father's heart. The moment he reached for the scalpel to cut into the still, living Russian girl, he had already become a demon. In his attempt to save one child, he took another's life. Even when cloaked in the name of fatherly love, this was something that could never be justified. Perhaps the reason the father repeatedly stopped Jack from exorcising the demon was because, deep down, he already knew that the demon had been in his heart all along. Only he could truly face the inner demon, accept the punishment that belongs to him, and through that, achieve redemption, allowing his daughter to come back to life.